The October wind swept through the streets of Salem, Massachusetts, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and something older, something that didn't belong to the world of the living. Michael Torres pushed his daughter's empty stroller along the cobblestone path of the historic district, his mind still replaying the argument with his ex-wife. She wanted full custody. Again, the courts, the lawyers, the endless battle, it was draining what little spirit he had left. He stopped near the old cemetery gates, the one tourists loved to photograph during the day. At night, it was different. The iron bars seemed to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it, and the shadows between the tombstones moved in ways that had nothing to do with the wind. Michael didn't believe in ghosts. He'd stopped believing in most things after his wife left, after the cancer took his mother, after life revealed itself to be nothing but a series of losses dressed up as lessons. Loss, are we? The voice came from behind him, smooth as silk and cold as December rain. Michael turned slowly. She stood beneath the street lamp, but somehow the light seemed to bend around her rather than illuminate her. Tall, impossibly beautiful, with skin like porcelain and eyes that reflected the moon with an unnatural silver sheen. Her dress was Victorian, deep crimson velvet that hugged curves that seemed designed to make men forget their own names. Long black hair cascaded over her shoulders like a midnight waterfall. "Just thinking," Michael replied, his voice steady despite the sudden quickening of his pulse. There was something wrong about her, something his rational mind couldn't quite process, but his instincts, the ones that had kept his ancestors alive through wars and plagues, were screaming warnings. She smiled, revealing teeth that were just slightly too perfect, too white, too sharp. Thinking is dangerous at this hour. Thoughts attract attention. She moved closer, and Michael noticed she made no sound, no footsteps, no rustle of fabric. She simply seemed to glide across the pavement, like smoke given form. "I'm not afraid of attention," Michael said, surprising himself at the truth of it. What did he have to lose anymore? His marriage was dead. His career as a journalist had stalled. He was fighting just to see his daughter on weekends. Fear seemed like a luxury for people who still had something to protect. This response made her pause. She tilted her head, studying him with the intensity of a predator assessing prey, except there was something else in her gaze now. Curiosity, perhaps, or confusion. "You should be," she whispered, closing the distance between them, until Michael could feel the cold radiating from her body. It wasn't the chill of autumn air. It was the cold of the grave, of centuries spent in darkness, of a heart that had stopped beating long before America was even a dream in Columbus's mind. "Do you know what I am?" Michael met her silver eyes without flinching. He'd stared down corrupt politicians, dodged bullets in war zones, held his dying mother's hand without looking away. Whatever this woman was, whatever game she was playing, he wouldn't give her the satisfaction of his fear. "Does it matter?" he asked quietly. For the first time in 300 years, Liliana Draculesti, once a princess of Wallachia, now the undisputed queen of the Eastern American vampire covens, found herself without words. Men cowered before her. They begged. They offered anything for one more moment of life. They certainly didn't respond to her with philosophical indifference. "You're different," she said, her voice losing some of its predatory edge. "The others, they always reek of desperation, fear, lust. But you—" She leaned closer, inhaling deeply. "You smell of resignation, acceptance. You've already died inside, haven't you?" "Maybe," Michael admitted. "Or maybe I just stopped caring about the things that don't matter." "And what does matter?" Liliana asked, genuinely wanting to know. She'd spent centuries perfecting the art of seduction, manipulation, control. She could make strong men weep and wise men act like fools. But this tired-looking man in a worn jacket, with shadows under his eyes and calluses on his hands, was somehow immune to all of it. "My daughter," Michael said simply. "Everything else is just noise." Liliana felt something stir in the hollow space where her heart used to beat, something she hadn't experienced since the night she'd been turned, since the night she traded her humanity for immortality. It felt uncomfortably like respect. She circled him slowly, her dress trailing behind her like blood in water. "Want to know what I'm wearing?" she asked, falling back on the old games. the seduction that had worked on thousands of men across the centuries. She'd whisper this question, and they'd stammer. Their eyes would glaze with desire, and she'd have them completely under her thrall. Michael looked at her, really looked at her, and then simply nodded. Not a hungry nod, not a lustful nod, just acknowledgement, as if she'd asked him if he wanted to know the time or the weather forecast. Liliana stopped moving. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. In 3 centuries of existence, through wars and revolutions, through the rise and fall of empires, through countless encounters with humans who thought themselves brave or clever or special, no one had ever responded to her like this. He'd left her speechless. Well, Michael asked after a moment of silence, his tone conversational. Are you to tell me, or was that just a line? Liliana laughed, a genuine laugh that echoed through the empty street like church bells at midnight. You are absolutely fascinating, she said, seeing him now not as prey, but as something entirely new. A puzzle, a mystery. What's your name? Michael Torres. And you? You may call me Liliana. She extended a hand that was ice cold to the touch. Michael shook it without hesitation, and she felt that strange stirring again. I think, she said slowly, that you and I should talk. Really talk. About what? Michael asked, genuinely curious now, about why a man who's lost everything isn't afraid of a monster. Liliana's silver eyes gleamed in the moonlight, and about what I'm wearing under this dress that makes me invincible and completely vulnerable. Michael raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a contradiction. Welcome, Liliana said with a smile that was equal parts dangerous and sad, to the nature of immortality. They walked together through Salem's historic district, an impossible pair, the immortal queen of darkness and the exhausted single father. Liliana led Michael to a Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town, a place that tourist maps labeled as privately owned, no trespassing. The iron gates opened at her approach without anyone touching them. Parlor tricks? Michael asked. Centuries of practice, Liliana corrected. When you're connected to the darkness itself, certain conveniences come naturally. The mansion's interior was exactly what Michael expected. Gothic opulence, heavy curtains, antique furniture that probably cost more than his annual salary. But there were unexpected elements, too. Modern art on the walls, a state-of-the-art sound system, books on psychology and philosophy mixed with ancient grimoires. You expected coffins and cobwebs? Liliana asked, amused by his expression. Maybe, Michael admitted. So, were you really? Some kind of vampire? Liliana poured 2 glasses of wine, a vintage from 1789, the year the Constitution was ratified. That word carries so much baggage. Hollywood nonsense. Teenage romance novels. But yes, essentially. I died in 1692, the same year this town lost its mind hunting witches. Ironic, isn't it? They burned innocent women while the real monsters watched from the shadows. She handed Michael a glass. He took it, but didn't drink immediately. And you've been here ever since? I've been everywhere since. Europe, Asia, South America. But I always return to America, this country. She gazed out the window at the moonlit landscape. It's built on contradictions, just like me. Freedom and slavery, dreams and nightmares, hope and despair. I feel at home in its chaos. Michael finally sipped the wine. It tasted like history, rich, complex, with hints of everything it had witnessed. So what do? Kill people? Build an army of the undead? Take over the world? Liliana laughed again, that genuine sound that seemed to surprise her as much as it surprised him. I run a corporate empire, actually. Real estate, technology, pharmaceuticals. When you have centuries to accumulate wealth and knowledge, you learn to adapt. The world changes, but power is always power, whether it's castles or stock portfolios. And the killing? Michael asked bluntly. Liliana's expression darkened. I won't lie to you, Michael. I've killed thousands, perhaps. In the beginning, I was a monster, angry, vengeful, drunk on my new power. But centuries teach you things. Perspective. The weight of all those deaths. Now I feed, but I don't kill. Donors who consent, who seek the euphoria of the bite. medical blood banks. I've learned to be a monster with a conscience, though I'm not sure that makes me better or worse. Michael studied her face, looking for deception but finding only a weary honesty. Why are you telling me this? You could just kill me back there or manipulated me or whatever vampires do. Because you asked, Liliana said simply, and because you're the first person in decades who's looked at me and seen a person rather than a monster or a fantasy. She sat across from him, her silver eyes meeting his tired brown ones. Now answer my question. Why aren't you afraid? Michael set down his wine glass and leaned back. You want the truth? I'm tired, Liliana. My ex-wife is trying to take my daughter away. She's not a bad mother, but she wants full custody because it's easier, cleaner. I worked myself to exhaustion to afford the lawyer fees. My own family thinks I should just let go, move on, start fresh. But Emma, my daughter, she's 5 years old, and she's the only thing in this world that makes sense to me anymore. He paused, running a hand through his hair. So when you appeared tonight, all mysterious and dangerous, asking me cryptic questions, I just thought, what's one more impossible thing? You could kill me, sure, but I'm already dying inside bit by bit every time the court sides of my ex, every time I have to say goodbye to Emma on Sunday night. A vampire is almost quaint compared to family court. Liliana felt something crack inside her, a piece of the armor she'd built over centuries. You really love her, your daughter, more than anything that's ever existed or ever will exist, Michael said without hesitation. I had a child once, Liliana whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. She never spoke of this. Never. But something about Michael's raw honesty demanded equal vulnerability. Before I was turned, a daughter, Isabella. She was 3 when the plague took her. I couldn't save her. All my money, my family's power, none of it mattered. I'm sorry, Michael said, and she could hear that he meant it. When the vampire found me weeks later, when he offered me immortality in exchange for... She gestured vaguely. Everything. I accepted. I thought eternal life would give me time to forget the pain. But it doesn't work that way. The pain is eternal too. Every child I see, every mother with her daughter, it's Isabella's face I see. 300 years, and grief is the one thing that refuses to age. They sat in silence for a long moment. 2 souls wounded by loss, separated by mortality, but connected by the universal ache of loving something you couldn't protect. You asked me earlier what I'm wearing that makes me invincible and vulnerable. Liliana finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Want to know the answer? Michael nodded, just as he had on the street, with that same calm acceptance. Liliana stood and placed a hand over her heart, the heart that no longer beat. This, my curse, my gift, this body that cannot age or die, that heals from any wound, that possesses strength beyond human comprehension. I'm wearing immortality itself, Michael, and it's the heaviest burden imaginable. She moved to the window, her silhouette framed by moonlight. I cannot die, so I cannot rest. I cannot age, so I watch everyone I might care about wither and disappear. I cannot have children, so I will never hold my own daughter again. I am invincible. Nothing can truly harm me. And I am completely vulnerable because I feel every loss, every goodbye, every ending, and I will feel them forever. Michael stood and walked to her side. That sounds like hell. It is, Liliana agreed. A beautiful, terrible, endless hell. But you keep going, Michael observed. Why? Liliana turned to face him, and for the first time he saw the ancient weariness behind her silver eyes, the weight of centuries, of countless losses, of an existence that had long ago lost its novelty and wonder. Because, she said softly, somewhere in this immortal heart, I still hope. I hope that one day I'll find something, someone who makes eternity feel less like a prison sentence. I hope that my daughter's death wasn't meaningless, that my transformation serves some purpose I haven't discovered yet. I hope that monster can find redemption, or at least peace. Michael reached out and took her ice-cold hand in his warm one. The contrast should have been jarring, but somehow it felt right. Life and death, warmth and cold, human and monster, all intertwined. Maybe hope is what we're both wearing, he said quietly. And maybe that's why we're both still fighting. Liliana squeezed his hand, feeling the pulse in his wrist, that steady rhythm of life she'd been without for so long. You left me speechless tonight, Michael Torres. Twice now. That's quite an accomplishment. Yeah, well, Michael smiled slightly. Being a single dad teaches you that sometimes the simplest responses are the most powerful. Kids don't want elaborate explanations. They want honesty. Is that what you see me as? Liliana asked, a hint of amusement returning to her voice. A child who needs honest answers? I see you as someone who's been playing complicated games for so long that you forgot simple truths still exist, Michael said. Like the fact that being invincible doesn't mean you can't be hurt, or that immortality doesn't protect you from loneliness. Liliana pulled him closer, her cold breath against his ear. You, Michael Torres, are dangerous. Not to my body. Nothing can harm that. But to my carefully constructed walls, my protective cynicism, my comfortable numbness. You're dangerous to the monster I've worked so hard to become. Good, Michael whispered back. Maybe it's time you remembered what it's like to be human. Dawn was approaching, painting the sky with shades of purple and gold. Liliana tensed as the first hints of light touched the horizon. Michael noticed immediately. The sun, he said. It really does hurt you? It would turn me to ash within minutes, Liliana confirmed, moving away from the window. One of the few things that can truly kill me. Sunlight, decapitation, a wooden stake to the heart. Though that last one is more complicated than the movies suggest. You have to mean it, really mean it, or my body just heals around the wood. So you haven't seen a sunrise in 300 years. The longing in Liliana's expression was answer enough. I remember them, every detail. The way the light would catch the morning dew, making the whole world sparkle like diamonds. The warmth on my skin, the sound of the world waking up. Birds singing, merchants setting up their stalls, church bells ringing. I was transformed at night, and I've been trapped in darkness ever since. Michael pulled out his phone and scrolled through his photos. He found what he was looking for and turned the screen toward Liliana. It was a picture of Em at the beach, backlit by the rising sun, her arms spread wide in pure joy, her face glowing with golden light. This is what you're missing, he said softly. This is my daughter greeting the sun last summer. She does this every time we go to the beach. Says she's catching the light. Liliana stared at the image with an intensity that made Michael uncomfortable. Her silver eyes shimmered, not with tears, because vampires couldn't cry, but with something deeper, older, a grief that predated language itself. She's beautiful, Liliana whispered. Perfect. Thank you for showing me. When's your court date? Liliana asked suddenly, changing the subject with the abruptness of someone trying to regain control of their emotions. 2 weeks, Michael sighed. My lawyer says it doesn't look good. My ex has a stable job, a new husband with money, a house in a better school district. I have a 1-bedroom apartment. Freelance work that barely pays the bills, and I'm apparently too emotionally invested. Too emotionally invested in your own child. Liliana's voice dripped with disdain. Your legal system is absurd. Tell me about it. Michael laughed bitterly. But money talks, and I'm barely whispering. Liliana was quiet for a moment, then made a decision that surprised even herself. What if I helped you? I have resources, lawyers, influence. I could... No, Michael interrupted firmly. Thank you, but no. I won't win Emma through manipulation or bot justice. If I'm going to keep my daughter, it has to be because I'm genuinely the best parent for her, not because some powerful entity pulled strings behind the scenes. Liliana felt that crack in her armor widen. You'd refuse help? Risk losing everything? For principle? My daughter needs to grow up knowing her father is a man of integrity, Michael explained. If I compromise that now, if I take shortcuts or accept questionable help, what am I teaching her? That the ends justify the means? That power matters more than character? No, I'll fight this the right way, or not at all. You impossible, stubborn, infuriatingly noble man, Liliana said, but there was no anger in her voice, only wonder. Do you have any idea how rare you are? In 3 centuries, I've met perhaps a dozen humans with that kind of moral clarity. Most people rationalize their compromises, their small corruptions. They tell themselves it's just this once, just this exception. I'm not special, Michael protested. I'm just a dad trying to do right by his kid. That, Liliana said, touching his face with her cold hand, is exactly what makes you special. The room suddenly felt smaller, more intimate. The approaching dawn painted shadows that danced across Liliana's pale skin like prophecies of her destruction. Michael found himself acutely aware of how close they were standing, how her silver eyes seemed to see straight through his defenses. I should go, he said, though he made no move to leave. You need to rest? Sleep? Whatever vampires do during the day. I should, Liliana agreed, also not moving. But I don't want this night to end. Isn't that strange? I have eternity, infinite nights stretching before me like an endless ocean. But this one night, these few hours with you, feels precious in a way that immortality can't explain. It's because it's real, Michael said. Not a game, not a seduction, not a power play. Just 2 broken people being honest with each other. That's rare at any time, in any life. Liliana closed her eyes, committing this moment to memory. The warmth radiating from Michael's body, the steady sound of his breathing, the scent of his humanity mixing with the ancient air of her mansion. Michael Torres, she said quietly, you've done something I thought impossible. You've made me feel human again. And you reminded me, Michael replied, that even when you think you've lost everything, life, or what everyone calls existence, can still surprise you. The sun's edge appeared on the horizon, and Liliana hissed in pain as a shaft of light pierced through a gap in the curtains, catching her hand. The flesh sizzled and smoked, filling the air with the scent of burning. Michael moved instantly, pulling the curtain closed and checking her injury. The hand was already healing, the charred flesh regenerating before his eyes. But the pain had been real, and Liliana's face showed it. Does it always hurt that much? Michael asked. Every time, Liliana confirmed. It's the universe's way of reminding me what I am, what I've lost. The sun gave life to the woman I was. Now it only brings death to the creature I become. Michael held her healed hand gently, his thumb tracing the place where a moment ago there had been only blackened bone. I'm sorry. Don't be, Liliana said. Pain reminds me I can still feel something. After centuries, that's not nothing. She led him to the door, walking through the mansion's shadow corridors. At the threshold, where the last of the night's darkness met the first of the morning's light, they paused. Will I see you again? Liliana asked, and Michael heard the vulnerability beneath the question. How many people had promised to return over the centuries? How many had she allowed herself to hope for? How many times had immortality taught her that attachment was just another form of pain? Yes, Michael said simply. I don't fully understand what's happening here, and I'm not sure what this is or what it could be. But yes, I want to see you again. Why? Liliana asked, genuinely confused. I'm a monster, Michael. I've killed people. I'll outlive you by centuries. Even if we became friends, I would watch you age, weaken, die. I would attend your funeral and then continue existing, carrying the memory of you through endless years. Why would you choose that? Michael thought of Emma, of the custody battle, of all the ways love meant choosing pain because the alternative, not loving at all, was worse. Because, he said, some connections are worth it, regardless of how they end. You've spent 3 centuries protecting yourself from loss by avoiding connection. Maybe it's time to try something different. Liliana pulled him into an embrace, her cold body against his warm one, death and life intertwined. You terrify me, Michael Torres, she whispered, in all the ways that matter. Good. Michael smiled against her shoulder. Terror means you're still alive, still capable of risk, still human where it counts. He pulled back and met her eyes. Same time tomorrow night? Liliana nodded, unable to speak. For the 3rd time, this impossible man had left her speechless. Michael stepped out into the early morning light, pulling his jacket tight against the autumn chill. As he walked back toward the city, He could feel Liliana watching from the shadows of her mansion, hidden from the sun, but unable to look away. Behind him, as the door closed and the heavy curtains shut out the daylight completely, Liliana stood in her darkened foyer and allowed herself something she hadn't permitted in decades. Hope. Dangerous, foolish, utterly human hope. And for the first time since the night of her transformation, she welcomed the sunrise. Not because she could see it, but because it meant the day would pass and night would return, and with it, the chance to see Michael again. In the darkness of her immortal prison, the vampire queen smiled. 2 weeks passed like a strange dream. Every night, Michael would return to Liliana's mansion after putting Emma to bed during his dwindling custody time. Every night, they would talk about philosophy, about pain, about the absurdity of existence, both mortal and immortal. She told him stories of history she'd witnessed firsthand: the American Revolution, the Civil War, the birth of the modern age. He told her about Emma's first words, her favorite bedtime story, the way she laughed when he made pancakes in funny shapes. Liliana introduced him to her world. Not the tourist trap vampire mythos, but the reality of it. He met others of her kind. Marcus, who'd been turned during the Roman Empire and now ran a chain of nightclubs. Yuki, a Japanese vampire who'd survived Hiroshima only because a blast occurred during the day while she slept. Chin, a former Shaolin monk who'd found a way to maintain his spiritual discipline despite his cursed state. They treated Michael with cautious respect, confused by Liliana's interest in him, but too wise to question their queen openly. But Michael saw the looks they exchanged, the concern, the disapproval, the pity. He was a mayfly to them, a brief flicker of life that would be gone before they'd finish adjusting to his presence. "They think you're making a mistake," Michael observed one night as they walked through Salem's old cemetery, the same place they'd met. "They think I'm being human again," Liliana corrected. "To them, that's the same as making a mistake. Are they wrong?" Liliana was quiet for a long moment, her silver eyes reflecting moonlight as she considered the question. "I don't know," she finally admitted. "I've spent 3 centuries building invincibility, emotional armor, accepting you into my life, allowing myself to care. It's like deliberately creating a vulnerability. I know how this ends, Michael. You'll age. You'll die. I'll be left with another ghost to carry through eternity. Then why continue this?" Michael asked, gesturing between them at whatever this was: friendship, romance, connection, all the above and none of the above. "Because," Liliana said, taking his warm hand in her cold one, "you've taught me something crucial. Invincibility isn't strength. It's cowardice. Real strength is choosing vulnerability, even when you know it will hurt. It's loving something mortal, even when you're immortal. It's risking everything for something that matters, even if only for a moment." She pulled him close, and for the first time, she kissed him. Her lips were cold, but the emotion behind the kiss was warm, desperately, achingly warm. It tasted like centuries of loneliness finally finding a moment connection, like hope flavored with inevitable sorrow. When they finally separated, Michael was breathless and Liliana was trembling, an impossible feat for a creature with her control. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I've seduced thousands, but I've loved so few, and never someone mortal, not since I was changed. We figure out together," Michael said simply, "one night at a time." But fate, as it often does, had other plans. The court date arrived with all the inevitability of dawn. Michael sat in the sterile courtroom, his lawyer beside him, his ex-wife and her new husband across the aisle. The judge reviewed the documents with a bored expression of someone who'd seen this drama play out 1,000 times before. The decision was swift and brutal. Limited custody, every other weekend. Summers negotiable. The judge cited Michael's unstable living situation and insufficient financial resources as primary factors. His ex-wife didn't even look triumphant, just relieved that the battle was finally over. Michael sat in his car in the courthouse parking lot for an hour afterward, staring at nothing, feeling the last of his fight drain away. He'd lost. Despite everything, despite his principles and his love and his desperate hope, he'd lost. His phone buzzed. A text from Liliana. How did it go? He couldn't bring himself to type the truth. Instead, He drove to her mansion as the sun set, as he had every evening for 2 weeks. Liliana knew the moment she saw his face. She pulled him inside without a word, held him while he finally broke, while the tears he'd been holding back for months finally came. She couldn't cry with him. Vampires couldn't produce tears, but she held it with desperation that spoke louder than any weeping could. "I'm sorry," she whispered into his hair. "I'm so sorry." When Michael finally found his voice again, it was raw with grief. "I don't know what to do. How do I tell Emma? How do I explain that I couldn't protect her from this? That I wasn't enough?" Liliana pulled back, her hands on his shoulders, her silver eyes boring into his. "Michael Torres, listen to me. You are enough. You are more than enough. The court system is broken. The measure of a father's love cannot be calculated in bank accounts or square footage. Emma knows you love her. That will never change, regardless of custody arrangements." "It's not fair," Michael said, the words sounding childish even to him. "No," Liliana agreed. "It's not. Fairness is a myth humans tell themselves to make sense of chaos. I've watched empires rise and fall, seen the innocent suffer and the guilty prosper. 300 years has taught me that justice is rarer than gold and twice as precious." Michael slumped into a chair, exhausted. "I feel like I'm dying, like part of me just stopped." "I know that feeling," Liliana said softly. "I felt it the night Isabella died. The night I accepted the vampire's offer. The night I realized immortality wouldn't erase the pain. It's the feeling of a life you imagine crumbling while you're still standing in the ruins." She knelt before him, taking his hands. "But here's what 3 centuries has also taught me. You survive, not because you want to, not because you're strong, but because you have to. Because Emma still needs you, even if it's only every other weekend. Because love doesn't end just because circumstances change. Because you, Michael Torres, are too stubborn and too good to give up." Michael looked at her through his exhausted grief. Can you turn me? Make me like you? Then I'd have eternity to fight this. Money, power, influence. I could. No. Liliana's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "Absolutely not." "Why?" Michael demanded, anger flashing through his pain. "You said yourself you have donors who consent. I'm consenting. I'm asking. Make me immortal, Liliana. Give me the tools to win this fight." Liliana stood, her expression harder than he'd ever seen it. "You think becoming a vampire would solve your problems? You think immortality is a solution rather than its own problem? Michael, listen to what you're saying. You want to trade your humanity, your warmth, your ability to walk in sunlight, your very soul, for a legal battle? It's not just a legal battle." Michael shouted. "It's my daughter, my purpose, my entire life. And what good is eternal life if you lose what makes you human?" Liliana shot back, her voice rising to match his. "If you become like me, you can never be the father Emma needs. You couldn't take her to the beach at dawn, couldn't attend her daytime graduation, couldn't walk her down the aisle in an afternoon wedding. You'd have power, yes, but you lose everything that makes you Michael." She moved to the window, staring out at the night that was her permanent prison. "I've lived 300 years, and I would trade every single one of them for a single day in the sun with my daughter. Don't make my mistake, Michael. Don't trade mortality for phantom power. The curse I wear, immortality, it's not a gift. It's a burden that gets heavier with every passing year." Michael buried his face in his hands. "Then what do I do? How do I survive this?" Liliana returned to him, lifting his chin until his eyes met hers. "You survive it the way I survived 3 centuries. One night at a time. One moment at a time. You love Emma fiercely during the time you have. You fight when you can, accept what you can't change, and refuse to let the system break your spirit. You remain human, Michael, because that's your strength, not your weakness." "I don't feel strong," Michael whispered. "The strongest people never do," Liliana said. "Strength isn't the absence of pain. It's continuing despite it. It's choosing vulnerability even when armor seems safer. It's being a mortal man who nodded when a vampire queen asked a seductive question. Not because he wasn't afraid, but because he'd already survived worse than death. She kissed his forehead, cold lips against warm skin. You left me speechless that night, Michael. Do you know why? Because in that moment, you showed me something I'd forgotten existed, genuine courage. Not the absence of fear, but the transcendence of it. You looked at a monster and saw a person. You faced the supernatural with the calm of someone who'd already wrestled with the truly terrible. Loss, grief, the failure of systems meant to protect children. Michael closed his eyes, letting her words sink in. What are we doing here, Liliana? What is this between us? Honestly, Liliana smiled sadly. I don't know. I'm a vampire who shouldn't be able to love. You're a human who has every reason not to risk more pain. By every logical measure, this whatever this is doomed before it even begins. I will outlive you. That's not a possibility, it's a certainty. Then why? Michael asked. Because, Liliana said, her silver eyes shimmering with emotions that predated language, some things are worth it even when they're temporary. You've reminded me what it feels like to be human, to hope, to care about something beyond mere survival. You've cracked my armor, Michael Torres, and shown me that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the only thing that makes existence bearable. She stood and walked to her desk, returning with a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, ancient silver with a deep red stone that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. This was Isabella's, Liliana said softly. A ring I had made for her 3rd birthday. She never got to wear it. I've carried it for 300 years as a reminder of what I lost, of why I can never be human again. She placed it in Michael's hand. I want you to give this to Emma. Not now. Save it for when she's older, for her graduation or her wedding, or just a moment when she needs to know she's loved across all boundaries. Tell her it comes from someone who understands that a father's love is eternal, regardless of custody arrangements or court decisions. Michael stared at the ring, tears streaming down his face. I can't accept this. It's too precious, too personal. Exactly, Liliana said. That's exactly why you must accept it. I've hoarded my grief for centuries, letting it calcify into armor. You're teaching me to let go, to trust, to give freely even when it hurts. This ring, Isabella's ring, it needs to be loved again. Emma will cherish it, and in doing so, she'll honor a little girl who died 300 years ago. Michael pulled Liliana close, his warmth against her cold, his mortality against her immortality. Thank you, he whispered, for everything, for showing me that even vampires can be human where it matters. Thank you, Liliana replied, for showing me that even humans can be immortal in the ways that count. Your love for Emma, that's eternal, Michael. No court can touch that. No time can diminish it. That's the real immortality. They stood together as the night deepened around them, two impossible beings finding solace in each other. The vampire queen who'd learned vulnerability and the single father who'd taught it to her. What happens now? Michael finally asked. Liliana smiled, that genuine smile that she'd rediscovered through knowing him. Now, we continue. I help you be the best father you can be in the time you have. You help me remember what it means to be human. We take each night as it comes, knowing that dawn will always separate us, but darkness will always bring us back together. That sounds... Michael searched for the right word. Impossible? Liliana suggested. Doomed? Foolish. Perfect, Michael finished. It sounds perfect. Liliana laughed, the sound echoing to the mansion like cathedral bells, beautiful and ancient and somehow new. You continue to leave me speechless, Michael Torres. Even now, even after everything. Good, Michael said, holding her close, because I've learned something from you too. Sometimes the best answer to a seductive question isn't words at all. Sometimes it's just a nod, an acceptance, a choice to engage rather than retreat. Is that what this is? Liliana asked. Engagement. This, Michael said, is two people choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. This is a mortal man and an immortal woman finding common ground in the space between heartbeats. His that continue, hers that stopped centuries ago. This is stupid and beautiful and doomed and eternal, all at once. I love you, Liliana whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Words she hadn't spoken to anyone in 300 years. Words that terrified her more than sunlight or stakes or any physical destruction. I know, Michael replied, and I love you. However this ends, and it will end, Liliana, we both know that. I love you now. In this moment. In this night. That's enough. Outside the mansion, dawn began its approach. The eternal enemy, the separator of their worlds. But for now, in the darkness that remained, the vampire queen and the single father held each other, two impossible souls finding possibility in each other's arms. And when Michael finally left, stepping out into the morning light that Liliana could never touch, he carried with him Isabella's ring, a vampire's heart, and the knowledge that sometimes the greatest strength is not in being invincible, but in choosing to be vulnerable. Behind him, Liliana stood in her shadowed sanctuary, watching through the crack in the curtain as he walked away. And though she couldn't follow him into the light, though she was bound to darkness forever, she felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries, completeness. Not happiness, exactly, but something better, purpose, connection, the knowledge that even an immortal existence could still be surprised by love. The vampire queen smiled as the sun rose, destroying any possibility of her touching its warmth. But for the first time in 300 years, she didn't mourn the sunrise, because night would return, Michael would return, and in the space between their separate worlds, they had found something rarer than immortality, a love that transcended the boundaries of life and death, time and eternity, human and monster. She was still wearing her curse, her immortality, her invincibility, her eternal loneliness. But now she wore something else too, hope. Fragile, foolish, utterly human hope. And it was the heaviest, most beautiful burden she'd ever carried.